Dude, here we go again, the EP this time, Charles Darling, Perception. Let's talk about the name first.
Okay, so Perception is the name of the EP, as you just said.
Fantastic.
So when I was writing it, I sort of decided what I wanted the whole thing to be about before I decided what musically was going to happen and what was specifically going to go on it. We actually talked about this in the last interview we did.
Yeah.
Perception as a concept is just something I find very thought-provoking and interesting. And the songs don't particularly have, other than the fact they're all written by me, they don't have a particularly sonic through line, but in terms of theme, lyrically, they all have some sort of connection with the idea of perception and things being... things as they exist is not necessarily the same way as you perceive them.
So does the perception change slightly with each song?
Yeah, I think they're about different types of perception.
Yeah.
The first song is kind of about a time in my life where I was kind of struggling. It's kind of the most low I've ever felt. I sort of have ups and downs, and I'm generally okay most of the time, but I'll have, a day that's like I'm really, really not doing well. And that particular song was about a time period that I just couldn't get back to myself for about 2 months. And it really wasn't good. But the music, I very much juxtaposes that kind of idea. So unless you, I think, read the lyrics as you listen, it's not quite clear the sort of dark undertones to it. But that's very much about overthinking in those moments and stuff. And I guess how you don't necessarily know how someone's doing, and the way they appear is not necessarily the way you perceive their state of mind, and what's going on is not the same as what's underneath. And that's how that one kind of ties in. And I guess in a similar way, Famous is about how other people perceived me, or how you perceive another person or whatever. So they're more kind of a person's opinion on someone else, whereas New York City is about kind of a more inward look at myself, and it's more first person, and it's less about what other people think of me or what I think about a person, and it's more about what I think about myself and where I've ended up, and or really about anyone, when you have a moment and you find yourself in a position you didn't plan for or you didn't ever mean to be, and then that's just kind of become your life.
Yeah, so each song is kind of a variation of the other, but also have completely different moments as well.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the start with, the first song. That was a 2-month period, but with you, how much of an escape was music? Was that something that helped you get back towards yourself?
I actually found it to be quite torturing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I find on the days where I'm maybe struggling, the thing I kind of struggle with is more of a kind of existential thing, and like, why does, not to be too depressing, but why does every action you do or care about have significance at all? Or it's really hard to find the point in anything.
Yeah, you deep everything.
Yeah, and normally music is kind of a way for me to go, well, I'm making a thing. So, even if I struggle to get up today, the point of getting up is a thing exists now that didn't yesterday, that kind of thing. And I found myself going, I know this is what I do. I throw myself into being creative when I'm struggling. And I kept trying. And I was actually co-producing and co-writing another EP alongside this one. And I kept trying, and I just couldn't come up with anything. And that, I think, kind of made things worse. Because in a way, if I hadn't bothered, it would just be sort of like, I'm down for a bit and maybe I'll come out of it. But sort of every day or every other day, it would be like, okay, enough's enough. I need to get back to me and normal. And I would try and be productive and fail, essentially. And that's very much why it's called Think Too Much. In terms of the part of my life that it's referencing, it's very much about overthinking and not being able to get out of overthinking. But on a more, kind of positive note, it's sort of a bit of a joke at myself for when I was recording the music. I was incredibly pedantic about the whole thing, and tiny little moments that you can't really hear in the finished thing took me hours or days because I'd got it into my head that I'm a perfectionist most of the time, but for this song in particular, it just took it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of whirlpool. You're stuck in this like cyclical structure, and it's difficult to get out of that. That's hard to get out of. And sometimes music is an escape for certain people. For you, it's kind of like that whirlpool was the music almost to a certain extent. So then lockdown hits, you've got the whole new brand, and it's like really hard because you can't go out and gig, you can't do the things that you love to do. Like, how much of an impact does that then have on a musician?
For me, it's been... I don't know that I would have ended up where I am because, I mean, I spoke to you before, this EP is less of a conventional EP and it's more of a prelude to the rest of the album, which it is on. And I don't know that I would have ended up... I'm not sure it impacts the music too much, but in terms of the stuff I was thinking about and then wanted to write about, it's all very, very internal and very private and very kind of closed off. And I think that's probably a side effect of a lot of isolation. And they're a lot maybe more personal than I would have felt compelled to write or talk about if not for that level of isolation. So I think it has had an impact, for sure.
100%. So within the actual creation of the music, there's the lyrics, that's one side of things. There's the melody, that's another side of things. There's the performance as well. There's a lot goes into the song. You've got to put it all together, right? And for people who maybe don't know that much about songwriting. But in terms of like musically, like you've got to write the notes for all of it. And it's got to a point now where like your vocal range is so massive, like it's huge, like almost without you even realising. So you've hit notes that like even Freddie Mercury never actually hit in songs for like Queen. Like that's a little bit crazy.
Yeah, it was. I didn't know that as I was doing it, and it was since pointed out to me, which is it's incredibly flattering to even be mentioned in the same, sentence as Freddie Mercury, because Queen in particular, in terms of the more rock aspects of what I do, are right up there with one of my main influences. And a lot of it's to do with the vocal melody. Yeah. And because I think aside from the incredibleness of his voice, the writing of the vocal melodies is spectacular.
I think something about Freddie Mercury live as well, like he's just captivating. There's a note on the EP as well that I think is pretty much the same as what MJ used to reach.
In terms of the high notes, it's always been more of the song is more important than the showboating on it. So in the song in particular that has the especially high note in New York City, that was more just kind of a consequence of kind of where it ended up, because I certainly didn't write that first. I wrote the chorus, and the chorus had a key, and then I thought, where will it go from here? Maybe it'd go up, and then up again, and you're at a point that's like, oh, I guess this is how it goes now. And it wasn't something I was aware I could even do before trying it.
So in terms of like the kind of next few months, you've got obviously more songs that are ready for people. You've got the album on the way. What's the build up to that? How do you go from EP to album? Let's say there's like a singer-songwriter out there who's going, do you know what, I really like Charles Darling is like my Freddie Mercury, right? Imagine. So what would your advice be to them following in your footsteps? How do you go along that progression of steps?
I'm not sure how specific an answer it is to your question, but as a general thing, I try and have kind of two heads on most of the decisions I make. You want to just be in it, because that, creativity and personal creativity comes from, I think, enveloping yourself in the song or whatever specific thing you're doing. But also you need to take a step back and think about how that's going to impact the next steps you take. Yeah. So my advice in terms of making a large scale thing is try and help future you out, if that makes sense. Yeah. So even if you're not entirely sure what you're going to need this thing or this song or this opportunity for, it's still good to take it if it's a good one.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, 100%.
I don't know, even if there's a photo shoot that you have no real need for, can't hurt to do it if it's going to be useful for you in the future, even if it's only 2 weeks in the future. Then if someone goes, oh, I've got this thing, I need it by the end of today or tomorrow, you're covered, and then you can not be distracted from what you're working on at the time. I don't know if that's a good answer or useful to your question.
No, it is. I think it's really useful. And I think a lot of people watching it will go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because I think a lot of people get to certain points and go, oh, I need to problem solve all of this stuff. So if you can problem solve kind of accidentally in advance, I think
the
really
thing with that
useful.
as well is you're making decisions without stress.
Yeah.
When everything's sort of in front of you and you need it now, I would tend to make silly mistakes and mess stuff up or make bad decisions because you're rushed, and then in 2 weeks or a month's time you might go, kind of wish I didn't do that.
Yeah. It's great how much effort goes into an EP. We talked about everything already, with the vocals, with the lyrics, with the melodies, with the actual like content as well that goes into it, because there's a lot of like real personal stuff that goes into it. And to front that with imagery, you've got like your look, which is really strong, but a lot of work goes into the imagery as well. And in terms of branding, each artist branding themselves is so important. And with Electric Blue, you had this whole like electricity vibe going on, which was great. There was like lightning streaks. They just looked beautiful. And that's continued into Perception as well, but slightly differently in the form of a mirror. How did you come up with that concept?
Well, it kind of just, with a lot of my work, I scale it back to what is the one sentence, one word, tiniest form of the idea. And with it being perception across all of them, it's about, how you see yourself or how other people see you, and how invariably that is two different things, the truth and the perception. And then I just sort of settled on, I thought there was something kind of visceral and just really weird about a vanity mirror that was just wrecked with cracks. So it pretty much just came from that, to be honest. That's kind of the through line across the whole EP, is that there is real existence and then there is perception, and which is completely different depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
It is one thing, but it appears to be something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know how well that's answered the question. But
Yeah, I mean, it answered it really well. It's just really interesting to listen to chat about it. I was like, yeah, no, 100%. And I was kind of like visualising a lot of stuff you were talking about as you were saying it. The image itself is very strong, the cracked mirror. But the caption itself, Perception, even when you were talking about it then, it made me think, it almost leaves it up to the audience as well for their own perception, because they may look at a broken mirror in a very different way to even how you've perceived it to be, which is the whole concept of perception.
Yeah.
So you have your perception on how your life's been the last few years. People might listen to it and get a completely different perception.
Yeah.
And they may also listen to it about their own lives and perceive it in a way that relates to them, which I think is really interesting, because it almost kind of opens it up to the audience.
In terms of the writing, that's something I was also quite conscious about in the second song, Famous. When I was writing the lyrics, I knew the kind of point I was trying to make, but with it being about perception and about subjective viewpoint on a thing, I was quite diligent with writing the words in a way that it can be understood in multiple different ways. You can listen to it quite flatly and think it's about a person who is desperate for fame and attention, or you can also read it from the perception of someone who is a bit jaded and a bit sick of the attention, and how it's not what it seems and it's not as good as it appears to be. And then in terms of what you're saying about the EP in general being interpreted in a individual way depending on the listener, that's something I was actively trying to achieve. I wanted it to be, I don't want to say confusing, but ambiguous.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because you get so many interesting reviews back on your work. It's really great. I'm well excited to hear the whole album. I think the EP is great. Best of luck with it, and I can't wait to see what comes next. And it's been lovely chatting to you.
But forgotten what I was saying. Completely forgotten what the end of that sentence was. Sure. I'm just going to take a second because I've got a massive cramp in my leg. my legs are actually dead. Like,
Is
I
it?
can't feel my foot.
So you must be buzzing to get back on the stage because you've got all of that music. That was